Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Vigilant and watched the stars through the main window. His ship moved through space on a normal patrol route near New Geneva Colony. The colony was small and peaceful, home to farmers and miners who worked hard to build new lives far from Earth. Jake had been to New Geneva many times before and always enjoyed the calm visits there. The ship's communication officer, Lieutenant Paul Green, suddenly turned toward Jake with a worried look on his face. An urgent message was coming through on the emergency channel. Paul put the message on the main speakers so everyone on the bridge could hear it. Dr. Lisa Carter's voice came through clearly, but with panic in her words. She was the director of the Meridian Children's Home on New Geneva. The facility took care of children who had lost their parents in space accidents, mining disasters, and other terrible events that happen when humans lived so far from home. "This is Dr. Carter at Meridian Children's Home," her voice said through the static. "We need immediate help. 3 unknown ships are approaching our facility. They are not responding to our signals, and they are moving in attack formation." Jake felt his stomach drop. The children's home was clearly marked as a humanitarian facility. It broadcast peaceful messages on all frequencies and had bright symbols painted on its roof that could be seen from space. Everyone in the galaxy knew what those symbols meant. They meant the building was full of innocent people who should never be harmed. "Set course for New Geneva immediately," Jake ordered his pilot. "Maximum speed." The Vigilant turned and began racing toward the colony. Jake watched the distance counter on his screen as the numbers dropped slowly. Too slowly. They were still 20 minutes away from New Geneva. When more messages started coming through, Dr. Carter's voice returned, but now she sounded terrified. "The ships are Zephyrian Empire vessels. They are targeting our facility with weapons. I repeat, they are aiming weapons at a children's home. We have 847 children inside, ranging from ages 3 to 17. Jake had dealt with the Zephyrian Empire before. They were a proud alien race with blue skin and sharp features. Humans and Zephyrians had been having disagreements about territory borders for several months, but nothing serious. There had been talks and meetings, but no violence. This made no sense. "Try to contact the Zephyrian ships." Jake told his communication officer. Paul worked at his controls for several seconds before shaking his head. "No response, Captain. They are not accepting any communication attempts." The next message from Dr. Carter made Jake's blood turn cold. "They are charging their weapons. All children are in the main building. We cannot evacuate in time. If anyone receives this message, please know that these children were innocent. They had nothing to do with any political disputes." Jake gripped the arms of his captain's chair so hard his knuckles turned white. He wanted to order his ship to go faster, but they were already at maximum speed. The laws of physics would not let them reach New Geneva any sooner. Through the communication system came the sound of children crying and adults trying to comfort them. Dr. Carter was still talking, but her voice was getting harder to understand as noise filled the background. "The ships are firing," she said. "They are using plasma cannons on a building full of children. This is not war. This is murder." The communication cut to silence. Jake and his crew reached New Geneva 15 minutes later. What they found would stay in their nightmares for the rest of their lives. The Meridian Children's Home was gone. Where the building had stood was now just smoking ruins and twisted metal. The grass around the facility was burned black. Small fires still burned in the wreckage. The 3 Zephyrian ships were nowhere to be seen. They had completed their terrible work and disappeared into hyperspace. Jake ordered his crew to scan for survivors, but the readings showed no life signs in the ruins. Lieutenant Paul Green was a young man who had joined the space service to see the galaxy and help people. He stared at his scanner readings with tears in his eyes. "Captain, there are no survivors. The building took direct hits from military-grade plasma weapons. Nothing could have lived through that." Jake felt something break inside his chest. 847 children. Gone. Murdered. For what reason? What could children possibly have done to deserve this? The ship's medical officer, Dr. Helen Ross, was crying openly as she looked at the destruction. Those children had already lost their parents, she whispered. They had already suffered so much. How could anyone do this to them? Jake activated the ship's recording systems and made sure everything was being documented. The galaxy needed to see this. Humanity needed to know what had happened here. The Zephyrians had crossed a line that should never be crossed by any civilized species. He opened the communication channel to Earth Command. Admiral Patricia Hayes answered the call within seconds. Jake could see her face on the screen and watched her expression change as he gave his report. Admiral, this is Captain Morrison of the U.S. Vigilant. I am reporting a war crime of the highest order. 3 Zephyrian Empire ships have destroyed the Meridian Children's Home on New Geneva. All 847 children inside are dead. The attack was deliberate and targeted. We have complete recordings of the incident. Admiral Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Jake could see the anger building in her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was deadly calm. Send me everything you have, Captain. Every recording, every piece of evidence. Then maintain position and secure the area. This ends today. Jake knew that everything had changed. The Zephyrian Empire had just made the biggest mistake in their species' history. They had killed human children. They had murdered innocents who had already lost everything, and humanity would make them pay for it with interest. The age of talking and negotiations was over. The age of fire and steel was about to begin. Admiral Patricia Hayes stood in the command center of Earth Defense headquarters and watched the footage from Captain Morrison's ship for the 10th time. Each viewing made her angrier. The recording showed 3 Zephyrian warships systematically destroying a building full of children. There was no military target, no strategic value, just innocent kids who had already lost their parents. The footage was being broadcast across every human world in the galaxy. The reaction was immediate and massive. Recruitment centers on Earth were flooded with volunteers. People who had never thought about military service were demanding to join the fight. Even the peaceful farming colonies were sending messages asking how they could help. President William Carter called an emergency session of the United Earth Assembly. Representatives from every human world gathered in the Great Hall. The president stood at the podium with red eyes and spoke in a voice filled with pain and anger. Fellow humans, he began. Today we witness something that will change us forever. The Zephyrian Empire has committed an act of genocide against our children. 847 innocent souls were murdered for no reason other than to send us a message. The assembly hall was completely silent. Every representative was thinking about their own children, their own families. The footage from New Geneva had been shown to them all. This was not an act of war, President Carter continued. This was the deliberate murder of defenseless children. The Zephyrian Empire has shown us that they have no honor, no mercy, and no right to exist alongside civilized species. General Marcus Stone was already mobilizing forces before the president finished speaking. Every available ship was being called back to active duty. Soldiers on leave were being recalled immediately. The massive shipyards around Earth were working around the clock to prepare the fleet for war. Commander Amy Rodriguez was deep in the intelligence bunkers beneath Earth's surface, going through every piece of information they had about the Zephyrian Empire. What she found made her sick to her stomach. The attack on the children's home was not random. It was planned at the highest levels of Zephyrian government. The intercepted communications were clear. High Commander Zektar of the Zephyrian fleet had received direct orders from the Zephyrian Council to demonstrate resolve through targeted elimination of human civilian infrastructure. The children's home had been chosen specifically because it would cause maximum emotional damage to humanity. Amy printed the communications and ran to Admiral Hayes' office. The Admiral read the documents with growing fury. The Zephyrians had planned this. They had deliberately chosen to murder children as a way to force humanity to surrender in their border dispute. Those monsters, Admiral Hayes whispered. They thought killing our children would make us weak. They thought we would beg for peace. News of the massacre spread beyond human space. Other alien species watched to see how humanity would respond. Some expected diplomatic protests and angry words. Others expected economic sanctions and political pressure. None of them expected what actually happened. Dr. Nathan Pierce was working in his laboratory when the call came. The military needed new weapons, and they needed them fast. Nathan had been developing experimental plasma systems for mining operations, but now those same systems would be turned into instruments of war. How quickly can you modify these for military use, General? Stone asked him during their video call. Give me 2 weeks and unlimited resources, Nathan replied. I will build you weapons that will make the Zephyrians wish they had never learned to use fire. Across human space, the same conversation was happening in thousands of research facilities. Scientists who had spent their careers improving life for humanity were now focused on ending life for their enemies. The rage was universal and pure. Captain Jake Morrison received new orders while his ship was still orbiting the ruins of New Geneva. He was to return to Earth immediately for reassignment to the war fleet. Every experienced officer was needed. For what was coming, Lieutenant Paul Green had not spoken much since witnessing the destruction. He spent his time staring at the scanner readings from the children's home, as if he could somehow find survivors that had been missed. Dr. Helen Ross was equally shaken. She kept talking about the medical supplies that had been stored at the facility. Medicine meant to help sick children that was now just ash. The journey back to Earth took 5 days. During that time, the crew of the Vigilant watched as the human response grew larger and more organized. Military ships were moving from every corner of human space toward rally points near Earth. It was the largest military buildup in human history. When they reached Earth orbit, Jake could not believe what he saw. The space around humanity's homeworld was filled with warships. Hundreds of vessels, ranging from small destroyers to massive battleships, were gathering for war. Construction crews were working to install new weapon systems on ships that had been designed for exploration and trade. Admiral Hayes called a meeting of all senior officers. The great briefing room was packed with captains, generals, and commanders from across the fleet. The atmosphere was electric with barely controlled rage and determination. Ladies and gentlemen, Admiral Hayes began, the Zephyrian Empire has declared war on humanity by murdering our children. They expect us to negotiate. They expect us to seek diplomatic solutions. They are wrong. She activated a holographic display showing the Zephyrian Empire's territory. Their worlds, their fleets, their military installations were all marked in red. Operation Fallen Angels will begin in 72 hours, she announced. Our objective is simple: total defeat of the Zephyrian Empire. Complete destruction of their military forces. Unconditional surrender or extinction. The room erupted in approval. Officers who had spent their careers protecting human colonies were now eager to destroy the species that had killed innocent children. Colonel Ryan Davis stood up from his seat. He commanded the most elite Marine units in human space. Admiral, my Marines are ready to show the Zephyrians what happens when you kill our kids. Commander Kate Williams was already working on new tactical doctrines. Human forces had always fought defensively, protecting their territory and avoiding unnecessary casualties. That was about to change. The new tactics were based on pure aggression. An overwhelming force. Dr. Nathan Pierce's voice came through the communication system from his laboratory. Admiral, the new weapon systems are ahead of schedule. The Thunderchild plasma cannons will be ready for installation tomorrow. The Reaper missile systems are being loaded onto the ships now. Admiral Hayes smiled for the first time since receiving the news from New Geneva. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who was about to deliver justice to those who had committed an unforgivable crime. Excellent work, everyone, she said. The Zephyrians wanted to send us a message by killing our children. We are going to send them a reply written in fire and steel. Operation Fallen Angels began at exactly 0600 hours Earth Standard Time. Across the galaxy, human ships moved from their positions toward Zephyrian space like a massive wave of metal and fury. Admiral Hayes watched from the command. Ship used justice as hundreds of vessels jumped to hyperspace simultaneously. Colonel Ryan Davis led the first strike force toward the Zephyrian border outposts. His Marines had been training for this moment since the news from New Geneva reached them. They had developed a new battle cry that sent chills down the spines of everyone who heard it. For the 847, they would shout before each attack. The first Zephyrian outpost was a small military station called Border Post 7. It housed about 200 Zephyrian soldiers who were responsible for monitoring human ship movements. They had no idea what was coming toward them. Ryan's ships dropped out of hyperspace just outside the station's weapon range. The Zephyrians immediately sent communication requests asking about human intentions. Ryan ignored every message. The time for talking was over. "All ships, this is Colonel Davis," he announced on the fleet channel. "Remember why we are here? Remember the children. Show them what humanity does to child killers." The attack lasted exactly 12 minutes. Human ships used their new Thunderchild plasma cannons to cut through the station's shields like they were made of paper. The Reaper missiles followed, turning the military installation into floating debris. Not a single Zephyrian survived. Word of the attack reached Zephyrian High Command within hours. They sent angry messages to human authorities demanding explanations and threatening retaliation. President Carter's response was broadcast across the galaxy for everyone to hear. The Zephyrian Empire murdered 847 human children in cold blood, his message said. They declared war on humanity when they chose to target innocents. We are simply responding to their declaration. Commander Kate Williams was developing new tactical approaches for the human fleet. The old methods of warfare focused on protecting ships and minimizing casualties. Kate threw those ideas away. Her new tactics were designed for one purpose: complete destruction of enemy forces regardless of cost. The second wave of attacks hit 3 Zephyrian military bases simultaneously. Human forces used overwhelming numbers and firepower to ensure quick victories. The message was clear to everyone watching. Humanity was not interested in fair fights or honorable combat. They wanted total victory. Dr. Nathan Pierce worked day and night in his laboratory to develop even more powerful weapons. The success of the Thunderchild cannons had exceeded his expectations, but he wanted to create something that would end the war quickly. His new project was called the Hellfire Torpedo, a weapon designed to crack the hulls of even the largest Zephyrian ships. Captain Jake Morrison had been given command of a new destroyer called the UES Vengeance. His ship was loaded with the latest weapons and crewed by volunteers who had all lost friends or family to Zephyrian attacks over the years. Jake felt the weight of command as he led his ship toward another Zephyrian target, the Zephyrian Empire. Tried to organize a counterattack, but their forces were scattered and confused. They had expected diplomatic protests, not total war. Their military doctrine was based on slow, careful campaigns designed to capture territory. They were not prepared for the hurricane of violence that humanity had unleashed. High Commander Zektar, the Zephyrian officer who had ordered the attack on the children's home, sent a message to his government requesting immediate reinforcements. His border forces were being destroyed faster than he could count them. The humans were fighting like wild animals instead of civilized beings. Lieutenant Paul Green served as Jake's communication officer aboard the Vengeance. He had not been the same since witnessing the destruction of the children's home. The young officer who had once believed in peaceful solutions now spoke only about making the Zephyrians pay for their crimes. "Captain," Paul reported during their approach to the next target, "we are receiving surrender signals from the Zephyrian facility ahead." Jake looked at the tactical display showing the enemy installation. It was a supply depot that provided food and equipment to Zephyrian military forces. The base had no offensive weapons and posed no threat to human ships. "Ignore the surrender signals," Jake ordered. "Continue the attack." Paul hesitated for a moment. In the past, human forces always accepted surrenders and treated prisoners according to galactic law. But the faces of 847 murdered children flashed through his mind. "Yes, sir," Paul replied. ignoring surrender signals. The supply depot was destroyed in minutes. Human forces were taking no prisoners and accepting no surrenders. The Zephyrian Empire had crossed a line when they killed children, and humanity was going to make sure they regretted it. Dr. Helen Ross was working aboard a hospital ship that followed the human fleet. She had expected to treat wounded human soldiers, but most of the casualties were coming from Zephyrian forces. The injured aliens looked at her with fear and confusion, unable to understand why humans had become so violent. "Why are you doing this?" one wounded Zephyrian soldier asked her in broken human language. "We were only following orders." Helen looked at the aliens' injuries and felt no sympathy. "You followed orders to murder children," she replied coldly. "Children who had already lost their parents. Children who trusted adults to protect them." General Marcus Stone coordinated the ground invasions of Zephyrian military planets. His Marines landed on each world like a plague of vengeance, destroying every military installation and capturing every officer involved in planning attacks on human civilians. The Zephyrian government tried to contact other alien species for help, but no one wanted to get involved. The galaxy was watching humanity's response with fascination and terror. Everyone understood that the humans were demonstrating what happened when their children were threatened. Commander Amy Rodriguez continued gathering intelligence about Zephyrian military operations. Her teams had identified every officer and politician involved in the decision to attack the children's home. Each name went on a special list that was distributed to human forces across the galaxy. "These individuals are to be captured alive if possible," Amy's orders stated. "They will face trial for crimes against humanity. If capture is not possible, termination is authorized." The war was becoming a demonstration of human determination and fury. Species across the galaxy watched in amazement as humanity transformed from peaceful explorers into efficient killers. The message was spreading: do not threaten human children. Admiral Hess received reports from across the battle zone. Human forces were winning every engagement. Zephyrian military units were surrendering or fleeing rather than fighting. The alien empire's military structure was collapsing under the weight of humanity's assault. "Status report," she requested from her tactical officer. "Admiral, we have destroyed 60% of Zephyrian border defenses," came the reply. "Their fleet is retreating toward their home system. Resistance is minimal," Admiral Hayes nodded with satisfaction. The Zephyrians had expected a political response to their attack on the children's home. Instead, they were learning that humanity protected its young with fire and steel, and they never forgot those who fell. The UES Retribution was the largest and most powerful ship humanity had ever built. Captain Charles Baker stood on its bridge and watched as his massive vessel led the final assault force toward the Zephyrian home system. The ship carried a special memorial plaque in its main corridor with the names of all 847 children who had died at New Geneva. Behind the Retribution came the entire human war fleet. 500 ships of every size and type moved through space like an armada of vengeance. Admiral Hayes had committed everything to this final assault. The Zephyrian Empire would surrender or be destroyed completely. Dr. Nathan Pierce had installed his newest weapons on the Retribution. The Hellfire torpedoes were designed to penetrate the strongest alien defenses. The ship also carried experimental pulse cannons that could disable entire enemy fleets with coordinated strikes. Captain Jake Morrison commanded a squadron of destroyers that formed the fleet's advance guard. His ship, the UES Vengeance, had become famous throughout human space for its aggressive tactics and complete destruction of enemy targets. Jake felt no mercy for the aliens who had murdered children. The Zephyrian home system contained their capital world and the largest concentration of their military forces. High Commander Zektar had gathered every available ship to defend the system. He knew that losing here would mean the end of the Zephyrian Empire. Lieutenant Paul Green monitored communications as the human fleet approached the enemy system. Zephyrian signals were filled with panic and desperation. Their military commanders were arguing among themselves about whether to fight or surrender. "Captain," Paul reported to Jake, The Zephyrians are broadcasting surrender offers on all frequencies. They want to negotiate terms. Jake looked at the tactical display showing enemy positions around their homeworld. Hundreds of Zephyrian ships waited in defensive formations. The same species that had killed innocent children now wanted to talk about peace. "Tell them we will accept only unconditional surrender," Jake replied. "Complete disarmament and the surrender of all officers involved in attacks on human civilians." The Zephyrian response came quickly. They refused the terms and prepared for battle. High Commander Zektar sent a message to his forces telling them to fight to the death rather than surrender to the humans. Admiral Hayes gave the order to attack from the command ship UES Justice. The human fleet moved forward like a wave of destruction. The new weapon systems that Dr. Pierce had developed were about to be tested in the largest space battle in galactic history. The first exchange of fire lit up space with plasma beams and missile explosions. Zephyrian ships opened fire with everything they had, but their weapons could not penetrate the improved armor of human vessels. The humans had learned from every previous battle and upgraded their defenses. Captain Charles Baker directed the Retribution's attack on the largest Zephyrian battleship in the enemy formation. The alien vessel was twice the size of any human ship, but it had never faced weapons like the Hellfire torpedoes. "Fire all forward torpedo tubes," Baker ordered. 6 Hellfire torpedoes streaked across space toward the enemy battleship, the Zephyrian. Shields flared and died as the weapons punched through their defenses. Explosions rippled along the alien ship's hull as its armor cracked and split. General Marcus Stone commanded the ground invasion forces that would assault the Zephyrian capital world once the space battle was won. His Marines waited in their drop ships, ready to hunt down every war criminal who had participated in the murder of human children. The space battle raged for 6 hours. Human tactics focused on overwhelming firepower and coordinated attacks that prevented the Zephyrians from using their numerical advantage. Ship after ship of the alien fleet was destroyed or disabled by weapons they had never seen before. Colonel Ryan Davis led Marine boarding parties onto disabled Zephyrian vessels. His teams had orders to capture specific officers alive for war. Crimes trials. The colonel carried a list of names provided by Commander Amy Rodriguez's intelligence teams. "Find High Commander Zektar," Ryan told his Marines as they entered a damaged Zephyrian cruiser. "That monster ordered the attack on the children's home. He faces justice today." Dr. Helen Ross worked frantically in the medical bay of a human cruiser as wounded soldiers were brought in from the battle. The casualties were lighter than expected because human ships had superior armor and shields, but every loss was felt deeply by the crews. Commander Kate Williams coordinated the tactical operations that were destroying the Zephyrian fleet. Her aggressive strategies were working perfectly. The aliens had never faced an enemy that was willing to sacrifice everything for victory. The tide of battle turned decisively in humanity's favor when the Retribution destroyed the Zephyrian flagship with a concentrated barrage of Hellfire torpedoes. The massive alien vessel broke apart in a series of explosions that could be seen from the planet's surface. High Commander Zektar was captured alive when his ship was boarded by Colonel Davis and his Marines. The Zephyrian officer tried to claim that he was only following orders, but Ryan had no interest in excuses. "You ordered the murder of 847 children," Ryan said as his Marines put restraints on the alien commander. "You will answer for that crime." With their fleet destroyed and their leader captured, Zephyrian resistance collapsed completely. The remaining ships either surrendered or fled the system. Admiral Hayes ordered the fleet to pursue any vessel that tried to escape. Captain Jake Morrison's destroyer was among the ships that chased fleeing Zephyrians. His crew showed no mercy to aliens who had participated in attacks on human civilians. The Vengeance destroyed 3 enemy ships that refused to surrender. General Stone's Marines landed on the Zephyrian capital world and began the occupation. Their orders were clear: capture or eliminate every government official and military officer who had been involved in planning attacks on human targets. The Zephyrian government building was surrounded within hours of the landing. President Carter had authorized the use of any force necessary to capture the officials responsible for the children's massacre. The aliens had nowhere to run. Dr. Nathan Pierce monitored the performance of his weapon systems during the battle. The Hellfire torpedoes had exceeded all expectations, and the pulse cannons had disabled dozens of enemy ships without destroying them completely. Human technology had proven superior to anything the Zephyrians possessed. Lieutenant Colonel Susan Parker led Special Forces teams in hunting down specific war criminals. Her units had been given detailed information about every Zephyrian officer who had participated in attacks on human civilians. Justice would be swift and certain. The battle for the Zephyrian home system ended with complete human victory. The alien empire's military forces were destroyed or captured. Their government was under occupation by human marines. The species that had murdered innocent children was now at humanity's mercy. Admiral Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Justice and looked down at the conquered Zephyrian world. The planet that had been the center of an interstellar empire was now occupied territory. The aliens had learned too late that humanity protected its children with overwhelming force. "Signal all human forces," she ordered. "The Zephyrian Empire has been defeated. Justice for the 847 has been served." News of the victory spread across human space within hours. On every human world, people celebrated the defeat of the species that had killed their children. The message was clear to the entire galaxy. Threatening human innocence would result in total destruction. 18 months after the attack on New Geneva, Admiral Patricia Hayes stood in the rebuilt Meridian Children's Home and looked at the memorial wall. 847 names were carved into black stone, each one representing a life cut short by Zephyrian cruelty. An eternal flame burned in the center of the wall, its light reflecting off the polished names. The war was over. The Zephyrian Empire had surrendered unconditionally after their homeworld was occupied, and their government dissolved. Every official and military officer involved in attacks on human civilians had been captured and put on trial. Justice had been served, but the cost would never be forgotten. President William Carter arrived at New Geneva for the dedication ceremony of the memorial. Representatives from every human world came to honor the children who had died. The small colony that had once been peaceful and quiet was now the most important place in human space. Captain Charles Baker walked through the memorial gardens with other officers who had fought in the war. The crew of the UES Retribution had requested permission to attend the ceremony. They wanted to see the names of the children they had avenged with their victory over the Zephyrian fleet. Dr. Lisa Carter had survived the attack on the original children's home by pure chance. She had been visiting the colony's medical center when the Zephyrian ships opened fire. Now she served as director of the new facility, which housed orphan children from across human space. "They were just babies," she said to Admiral Hayes, as they stood before the memorial wall. Some of them were only 3 years old. They had their whole lives ahead of them. Admiral Hayes nodded silently. The faces of those children haunted the dreams of everyone who had fought in the war. The victory against the Zephyrians felt hollow when measured against the lives that had been lost. Colonel Ryan Davis commanded the occupation forces on the former Zephyrian homeworld. His Marines maintained order while human administrators worked to rebuild the alien society. The Zephyrians were learning to live under human supervision, and most of them seemed grateful for the stability. High Commander Zektar and his subordinates had been executed after their war crimes trials. The trials had been broadcast across the galaxy to show other species what happened to those who harmed human children. The message had been received clearly by every alien government. Commander Amy Rodriguez had established new intelligence networks throughout the galaxy to monitor potential threats to human civilians. Her teams watched for any signs of hostile activity directed toward human colonies, especially facilities that housed children. General Marcus Stone spoke at the memorial ceremony about the lessons learned from the war. "We discovered that humanity has a line that must never be crossed," he said to the gathered crowd. Threaten our children, and you will face our complete fury until you surrender or cease to exist. Dr. Nathan Pierce had returned to peaceful research after the war, but his weapons remained in production. The Hellfire torpedoes and pulse cannons were now standard equipment on all human warships. The galaxy had learned that humanity possessed the technology to back up their threats. Captain Jake Morrison served as the commander of the New Geneva Defense Force. His ship, the UES Vengeance, orbited the colony continuously to ensure that nothing like the original attack could ever happen again. Jake had requested the assignment personally. Lieutenant Paul Green had been promoted and transferred to intelligence work under Commander Rodriguez. The experience of witnessing the children's massacre had changed him completely. He now dedicated his life to protecting human civilians from alien threats. Dr. Helen Ross worked at the medical facility attached to the new children's home. She treated both human and alien patients, but she never forgot the images from the original attack. Her compassion had limits that had been defined by Zephyrian cruelty. The Zephyrian survivors lived under the Meridian Doctrine, a new human policy that had been announced after their defeat. Any species that attacked human civilians, especially children, would face total war until they surrendered unconditionally or were completely destroyed. Other alien governments had taken notice of humanity's response to the children's massacre. Trade agreements were signed quickly. Territorial disputes were resolved through negotiation, and requests for military cooperation were treated with respect. No one wanted to provoke the species that had destroyed an entire empire to avenge their children. Lieutenant Colonel Susan Parker led the teams that continued hunting down Zephyrian war criminals who had escaped during the final battles. Her units operated throughout the galaxy, tracking down aliens who had participated in attacks on human civilians. Justice would find them no matter where they tried to hide. President Carter delivered the main address at the memorial ceremony. He spoke about the children who had died and the response their deaths had provoked. These 847 innocent souls changed the course of galactic history, he said. Their deaths showed the universe that humanity will protect its own with fire and steel. The ceremony concluded with the reading of each child's name. As every name was spoken, a bell chimed once. The sound echoed across the colony and was broadcast to every human world in the galaxy. 847 chimes for 847 lives that would never be forgotten. Admiral Hayes placed a wreath at the base of the memorial wall. The flowers were from Earth, grown in soil that had nurtured humanity for thousands of years. They represented the connection between all human children. Whether they lived on humanity's birth world or the farthest colony, the memorial inscription was simple but powerful. They were innocent, they were defenseless, they were ours. Let the galaxy remember that humanity protects its children with overwhelming force, and we never forget those who fall. Captain Charles Baker read the names of his own crew members who had died in the war. 43 humans had been killed during the fighting, but their sacrifice had saved countless others. From suffering the same fate as the children of New Geneva, the war had transformed humanity from a peaceful species focused on exploration and trade into a military power that commanded respect throughout the galaxy. The transformation had been bought with the blood of innocence, but it ensured that such innocence would be protected in the future. Commander Kate Williams had written new military doctrines based on the lessons of the war. Human forces would never again rely on defensive strategies when their civilians were threatened. The response would be immediate, overwhelming, and final. Dr. Nathan Pierce's research facilities had been expanded to develop even more advanced weapon systems. Humanity would never again be caught unprepared when facing threats to their children. The galaxy would learn that human technology could destroy any enemy foolish enough to harm innocence. As the sun set over New Geneva, the eternal flame continued to burn beside the memorial wall. The light would shine forever in memory of 847 children who had died for no reason other than the cruelty of aliens who thought humans were weak. The Zephyrian Empire was gone, its worlds occupied, its people supervised by human administrators. The species that had killed children to send a message had received a reply written in fire and steel. The message was clear to every civilization in the galaxy: humanity protects its own and they never forget.